Hello and welcome to the Wildcast podcast. This is your host, Michael Lev, senior writer and columnist for the Arizona Daily Star. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. We have a special guest today. It's Jamie Plunkett. He is a staff writer for Horned Frog Blitz, which is part of the 24/7 Sports Network. And Jamie is, I would say, a certifiable Big 12 baseball expert. Am I overstating things, Jamie?
Man, I will take that title if you're handing it out. I do love Big 12 baseball. I think it has a lot to offer. I think across the national landscape, the Big 12 is undercovered when it comes to baseball, and so anything I can do to help lift up the conference and the excellent baseball that's being played, I'm willing to do.
All right, we will definitely get into the Big 12's place in the college baseball kind of media ecosystem a little bit later. But the reason we have Jamie on this week is that Arizona is hosting TCU in a huge three-game series this weekend at High Corbett Field, starting Friday and going through Sunday. TCU, I think, might be the best team in the conference. They're number 17 in RPI right now. Arizona coming off a series loss at Texas Tech has fallen to number 25, but big opportunity to move up if they should win the series against the Horned Frogs. So we are going to talk all things TCU, Arizona, and Big 12 baseball here with Jamie for the next 45 minutes or so. Let's start with this, Jamie. TCU is having a really good year. They have a breakout freshman in Sawyer Stroh-Snyder, who's expected to play this weekend, I guess, after smashing his face into the wall recently. They also have probably the best pitcher in the Big 12 in transfer Tommy Lepore. So give me your overall takeaways on this season so far for the Horned Frogs.
I think it's a nice bounce back from 2024, where TCU missed the NCAA tournament for just the third time in the last 20 years. It was a transition season. They had lost a lot to graduation from the previous year in 23, where they made the College World Series, and rebuilding some of that talent didn't quite hit the way that they hoped, especially some of the transfers that they brought in last season. So this year was all about youth because they signed a consensus top 10 recruiting class out of high school, and then supplementing in the transfer portal. You already mentioned him. Tommy Lepore has been an absolute home run from the transfer portal. A kid from Wichita State. It's the second year in a row TCU's gotten their ace from Wichita State. So I don't know if the Shockers are too pleased with TCU right now, but this is a really talented, incredibly young ball club that is playing really well because some of the young talent has stepped in to the college ranks and they haven't blinked. You mentioned Sawyer Stroh-Snyder. Noah Franco is another true freshman who's playing incredibly well. Nolan Traeger is a true freshman who's playing incredibly well. They have young talent all across the board, and right now they're having a lot of success.
I don't know if Wichita State wants to be known as like a farm team, but last year's ace for Arizona, Clark Candiotti, also transferred from Wichita State, and now he's playing professional baseball. So maybe this is the place to go for power conference teams if they're looking for good pitching. What can Wildcat fans expect to see when Lepore steps on the mound on Friday at High Corbett Field?
A lot of energy, a lot of intensity. He is a wear it on your sleeve kind of guy. It's something that he's actually had to work on reining in at times this year. But as far as pitch mix goes, he's got a fastball that can run up to 100. He commands it incredibly well within the strike zone. He's got a really big sweeping slider that he likes to play off of the fastball. And then he also mixes in a changeup and a curveball every once in a while to kind of keep hitters off balance. But he's a guy who has put 6 consecutive quality starts out there. So he's looking to make that the 7th on Friday night, which would give him the second longest quality start streak in TCU program history. And his velocity is something that doesn't really wane late in games. I mean, you go back to his start this past Friday against oh my gosh, who did they just play? Baylor, and he set a career long outing for. He went 8 2/3 innings. He was hitting 100 in the ninth inning. His 111th pitch was 99 miles an hour. His 113th pitch was 100 miles an hour.
Wow.
And so he's a guy that can maintain his velocity over the course of a long start. He commands the ball incredibly well. He's not the biggest high strikeout guy, which you would think with the velocity that he's got, but he still does pitch to contact a lot. TCU's got a very strong defense behind him that's turned, I think, the most double plays in the Big 12 this year. So he's been able to work himself out of some jams, and then he's got the stuff to be one of the best in college baseball.
We talked to Chip Hale today, Arizona's head coach, and he was saying that he was told the players who they played New Mexico State Tuesday night, and he said they saw a lot of upper 80s fastballs, and he said you're going to see an upper 80s changeup against
Mhm.
Tommy Lepore because his fastball is in the upper 90s. He's got a 7-2 record, 2.14 ERA. That is the best in the Big 12. Chip also mentioned that, TCU pitchers generally have good changeups, and that's something that Kirk Saarloos teaches. He himself was a pitcher in professional baseball who had a good changeup. I remember last year there was a midweek game that Arizona played at TCU. There was a lefty, I can't remember his name, who pitched kind of the game of his life against the Wildcats, and it was a lot of changeups that they were
Yeah.
swinging over. You don't see
Yeah.
across college baseball exceptionally good changeups, but if you've got it and guys on your staff have it, that's probably one of the reasons that TCU is near the top in ERA in the league.
Yeah, it's something that he looks for. Like you mentioned, Kirk pitched at Cal State Fullerton. He pitched in the College World Series. He was a 10-year veteran in the pro ranks. He was one of the Houston Astros that threw a combined no-hitter against the New York Yankees back in the late 90s. But he is an interesting guy because as the head coach, you know that they have such a host of responsibilities these days, and he still wants to be so locked in with pitching. He still calls the pitches for TCU, so he stays engaged with his pitching staff that way. Is really hands on when it comes to his pitching staff. He also has Dave Lawn on staff, who Arizona fans probably remember as TCU's official pitching coach, but they work in tandem to get the staff ready. And the pitcher that you mentioned from last year's midweek game is Braden Sloan. He is still on the staff. He's a long reliever now. He typically comes in fourth, fifth inning on a Saturday or a Sunday and tries to ride out the rest of the game for TCU. Incredible changeup, makes his fastball look a lot better than it probably would be if his fastball was his primary pitch. And he's worked on a curveball as well this year that's given him a little bit more length in outings because he's got that third pitch to fall back on as well. But the changeup is an important pitch. As a left-handed pitcher in my own past, I understand the importance of a changeup, especially when your fastball doesn't have quite the amount of life that it needs these days to get past hitters.
What was your max velocity back in the day, Jamie?
I was a high 80s guy. I was a crafty lefty. It was all about location, location, location.
Hey, high 80s is nothing to be ashamed of at all. That's pretty
It's fair.
impressive. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. So, Chip also told us today that they are switching the order of their starting rotation. So, sophomore Owen Kramkowski is actually going to pitch on Friday, and third-year sophomore Colin McKinney is going to move to Saturday. Owen Kramkowski, similar to Lepore, doesn't have a crazy amount of strikeouts, but he's able to go deep into games. He has a great strikeout to walk ratio that I think is top 10 nationally. And they're looking for more length out of their Friday starter. Colin McKinney has great stuff. I'm sure you remember him from
Hmm.
Baylor, but he has trouble commanding that stuff at times. His ERA is in the low threes, but he's struggled to get out of the third or fourth inning on multiple occasions. And that's kind of had a domino effect for the pitching staff. They've had to use Casey Hintz, who's kind of a funky side arming right-hander, maybe more than they would want to as a piggyback option on Fridays. He's had to go second and third time through the lineup, and maybe his effectiveness has waned as a result of that. So we'll see how this works with Kramkowski, who's a local kid from Walden Grove High School here, becoming the number one guy. They did switch their 1 and 2 starters last year too. Jackson Kent was the number one starter at the beginning of the season, and Clark Candiati was number 2. Mid-season, they switched them around, and that seemed to work really well. So I think a really, really enticing matchup between aces on Friday, which is what you expect in a high-level college baseball series. When we asked Chip about TCU, he wasn't quite ready to go there in saying that they were the best team in the conference. he actually said he thought ASU had the most talent of any team that he had seen. And you saw that up close and personal in that wild series that the Sun Devils and the Horned Frogs had down here. What do you remember from that series?
Well, I remember Kin Vu didn't play on Saturday and Sunday, and for a brief moment, I thought that actually gave TCU an advantage.
Mm.
Didn't turn out that way, as TCU won Friday, and then Arizona State took the next two in pretty emphatic fashion. But yeah, no, that's a very talented ball club. They've put together, a really good season. I think they're fourth in the conference standings right now, primed to be a 2 seed somewhere when the NCAA tournament rolls around. And I think that they're one of those programs that obviously has a history of tradition, hasn't made the tournament in the last 2 or 3 years under Bloomquist, but has a chance now to really kind of get back to their old form. He's done a tremendous job of getting pitching talent in there. I mean, Martinez is an incredible arm that he can roll out there on Friday night, and then you've got a lefty that you can bounce off of him the next day. I think that that's just the more pitching that you can have that's weekend ready, the better you're going to be in this league, because it is a really talented offensive league. And so the more you can keep runs down, the better opportunity you're going to have to win a lot of ball games. And Arizona State's been able to do it that way this year.
The scores of ASU's wins at TCU were 26-9 and 12-11.
Yeah.
I do not think this is going to be a high scoring series this weekend. High Corbett
Yeah.
Field is kind of like a Coors Field Light or Coors Light Field, however you want to put that. Like, we've got elevation here, over 2,000
Mm-hmm.
feet. The dimensions are big. Like, guys will be frustrated sometimes when they hit the ball 395 feet to either gap and it ends up 10 feet short of the wall. Like, one of the gaps is 405 and one is 410. A lot of doubles and triples in this ballpark, and not a lot of home runs. Arizona's given up the fewest home runs of any school in the Big 12. And when I heard Chip talk about the changeup, and also factoring in that Arizona's best player, Brendan Summerhill, probably is not going to play this weekend, I think you're going to see a lot of 3-2, 2-1, 4-3 type of games, which makes for a lot of drama. Maybe people don't necessarily like that style of baseball, but that's how I see this weekend playing out.
I could totally see that as well. TCU, I know the Arizona State series doesn't necessarily reveal this, but TCU also plays in a pitcher-friendly ballpark, and so they're used to those low-scoring affairs as well. For example, Carson Bowen, TCU's catcher and sometimes plays first base, hit a ball about 103 miles an hour off the bat to left field on Tuesday night and didn't even hardly make the warning track. Because of the way the wind situated at Lupton on Tuesday. And so the Frogs are used to being gap to gap in their lineup, and they're used to getting on base and stealing bases. That's how they like to do it. And they're also, developing a really healthy, some really healthy depth in the bullpen, so that they've got guys that are ready to come in high leverage situations and shut opposing offenses down. They just this past weekend against Baylor, I think the bullpen only allowed, I think it was 3 runs all weekend. And so they've got a lot of young talent in the bullpen as well, a lot of veteran talent back there, like Braden Sloan, who we've already mentioned. Mason Brassfield is a true freshman lefty who's come on and been an incredible long reliever for the Frogs as well this year. So this is a team that's built to win a couple of different ways, but they're definitely comfortable in low-scoring games.
Yeah, and Arizona did face TCU in the Fayetteville Regional a couple years ago. TCU won that game. As mentioned, they played them in a midweek last year, but I don't recall them coming here since I've been on the beat. Maybe they have, but always kind of an interesting experience for teams that aren't used to playing here. Not only the dimensions, it's really windy at times, and opposing teams also have a lot of trouble with the twilight. With the game start at 6:00, you will undoubtedly see 1 or 2 fly balls where guys are just like, putting their arms up, like where is it? So TCU is 14-7 in the Big 12. They are tied for 3rd place with ASU. The number 1 team in the league is West Virginia. And I don't think TCU plays West Virginia this year, but I'm sure you've been following along. I mean, they almost never lose. Arizona somehow was able to take 2 of 3 from them. That included a crazy 16-inning game on a Friday. But I would say that that West Virginia has been the biggest surprise of the year in the Big 12. What do you think?
I would agree with that. I think first year head coach, a lot of roster turnover, losing a guy like JJ Weatherholt last year. You expect maybe a little bit of recession or a regression, but they hit the portal incredibly hard. They recruited very well this year, and they've got a lot of young talent. They remind me a lot of this TCU team. A lot of new pieces, a lot of new faces, but everything clicked and clicked early on for West Virginia. And they also have the benefit, just from a win percentage standpoint, of only having played one game in Stillwater because of the terrible weather that hit Oklahoma that weekend that they were down there. And so I don't see anybody catching West Virginia at this point. I would argue, even if they weren't sitting first atop the standings, that they're one of the best teams in the conference this season, and definitely a force to be reckoned with. I think that's probably, frankly, Arizona's most impressive weekend this year. I know Arizona's had some really good weekends across the board, but that one, going up to Morgantown and taking 2 of 3 from this West Virginia team, is nothing to scoff at. So that's an impressive series win.
Yeah, things got spicy up in Morgantown too. There were some words exchanged between Adonis Guzman, Arizona's catcher, and some of the Mountaineers players, some of their fans, and then this was after Adonis hit a home run, and then he hit another home run later in the game, and was really kind of relishing that role of the villain. The way things stand right now, and of course things can change quite a bit, West Virginia is inside the top 16 in RPI, so it is conceivable that there will be a regional in Morgantown, which would be a boon for the Big 12, to be sure, a boon for that program, as you mentioned, and what was kind of supposed to be a period of transition. You did also mention, because you're a professional podcaster and a media creator, Jamie, that they played only one game at Oklahoma State. And I was going to bring up Oklahoma State, not in a good way. It's probably the biggest disappointment in the Big 12 so far this year. I believe they were ranked 17th by D1 Baseball to start the season, and they are sub 500 in the Big 12. What do you think has gone wrong for the Cowboys?
I think it's one of those situations, and we're seeing this kind of across the board with all of Oklahoma State's athletics programs right now, outside of women's basketball, but they're having a lot of trouble when it comes to talent retention. And so they're undergoing in a different way than maybe West Virginia is experiencing it. They're losing some of their talent to other schools, and they're struggling to bring in the requisite talent to continue to compete. They were, like you said, the top 25 preseason team. I believe they were the preseason favorite in the Big 12 based on the Big 12's preseason poll. They were the favorite in the conference, and it just hasn't worked out for them. The hitting has been really inconsistent. The pitching didn't get going at all early in the season. They were losing a lot of games. It felt like 12-9, 11-8, those kind of situations. And I think some of the inconsistencies that can happen when you're trying to continually reconstruct your roster at the level Oklahoma State is and Josh Holiday is you're going to see some of the in-season continuity struggle to really kind of come together. Now, TCU has been in a similar situation in past years. I would say 2024 was a year like that. This year was another situation where TCU could have been in a similar spot just because they had such a large freshman class coming in. But sometimes, talent bears out and talent covers up some of your warts. And unfortunately for Oklahoma State, that just hasn't been the case this year.
Right. So the Big 12 tournament is coming up here in a few weeks. For the longest time, Arizona played in the Pac-12, which didn't have a tournament. They launched one toward the end of the Pac-12's run, not knowing that the Pac-12 was going to die. They had it for 3 years up in Scottsdale, and it was super fun, and it really benefited Arizona a couple different times where they were kind of maybe on the border's edge of making the tournament, or maybe on the wrong side of the bubble, and had a good run in the tournament. Last year, they actually won the tournament along with winning the regular season by identical 4-3 scores. Both games were walk-offs, same uniforms. It was a whole thing. But I imagine that you have been to the Big 12 tournament in your days, based on TCU's in Fort Worth, and the tournament is in Arlington. What is that experience like? Tell us about the Big 12 tournament.
It's really cool. So yeah, I mean, the ballpark in Arlington is it's not the ballpark in Arlington anymore. Globe Life Field is about 20 minutes from my house, so it's a really nice, easy drive. It's where the Texas Rangers play. It's a nice covered indoor stadium, and so despite the Texas heat, it's always 72 degrees and sunny in there. But I really like that the Big 12 has moved its baseball tournament to a professional venue located in DFW personally, just selfishly, obviously for travel reasons, but also I think it's a really cool experience for players in the Big 12 to step onto a professional baseball field and be able to play and compete in a stadium of that caliber. Um, yes, the Brickyard in Oklahoma City was really cool and fun and had its own level of uniqueness to it. But this is a place where, I mean, especially in an expanded conference, you're trying to get 12 different fan bases in and out of this venue. You're trying to get 12 different baseball teams in and out of this venue, schedule practice times, make sure that everybody has cage time, this, that, and the other, all the details that people don't think about when they just show up on a game day. And the Rangers are incredible hosts. Their ownership group and the stadium ownership group want more college baseball there. They want that to be a place where college baseball teams come and play. And that's why you see they have 3 or 4 weekends of, non-conference round robin tournaments there every year. They host a ton of local baseball. They try to host baseball playoffs every year. They do a lot of prospect games there. Perfect Game does a lot of tournaments and camps out there and stuff. This is a stadium that wants to be more involved in baseball at every level, and you feel that just in the way they accommodate teams and fans for the Big 12 tournament. They're incredibly welcoming. They want to make it a fun experience for everybody. And the venue is top notch. It does look a little funky on the outside. It kind of looks like a warehouse, but you get in the doors of the stadium and it's top tier amenities, incredible sight lines wherever you're sitting, and just good old fashioned baseball when Big 12 teams hit the dirt.
That was my experience when I was there for Chip Hale's first ever college baseball coaching experience. The Wildcats opened the 2022 season in Arlington at that ballpark,
Yeah.
and it does have that look kind of from the outside. It's sort of metallic silver, and you're kind of like, what is this? But inside, it is beautiful, and not having weather delays when you're trying to get through a tournament in 3-4 days is a huge deal. Just ask the
Hmm.
SEC
Yeah.
what that's like. I don't love the single elimination format that they're going to be utilizing. The Pac-12 had like a pod system where everyone would get to play at least 2 games. So, you could go out there and, a bunch of teams are going to play only 1 game and that's it. And there also will be a lot of different strategies being utilized by the coaches depending on where their team stands, as far as the NCAA tournament goes. Like, do you need to win some games? Are you kind of set where you are? How hard are you going to try? What pitchers are you going to use? How much an advantage do you think it is to get into that top 4, which
Oh,
that gives you the first round bye?
yeah, that's huge. That's absolutely huge because you're looking at a much shorter weekend. You can really, I mean, it's 3 wins to win the Big 12 championship at that point. So you can really just work your normal weekend rotation. You're not having to figure out who your fourth starter is going to be. Okay, are we moving this long reliever into the starting role? But he hasn't really done that all year. What are we doing with our lineup? Are we trying to do a lot of lefty righty matchups? Who are we bringing? It makes it so much easier because you can approach it much more like a normal weekend just to get that top 4 bye. So, like this weekend series between TCU and Arizona is huge for that very reason because TCU is sitting there at 3, Arizona's there at 5, and both teams want that extra day of preparation, of rest, and making sure that they've got the arms necessary to make this 3-day run.
There are, I would say, 6 teams that are in contention for those top 4 spots. Those being West Virginia, Kansas, TCU, ASU, Arizona, and Kansas State. And I'm pretty sure West Virginia finishes the season against Kansas and Kansas State. So they could kind of knock each other off to some degree. But as you mentioned, huge series for the Big 12 standings this year as those teams jockey for position and try to get into that top 4. 12 of the 14 baseball playing schools make the Big 12 tournament. The top 4 get buys. So numbers 5 through 12, will square off in the first round, and they'll feed into what would be the quarterfinals out there in Arlington. Can't wait for that. How well does the TCU fan base travel for an event like that?
Pretty well. I mean, it's an easy drive for all of the local folks. TCU doesn't have the largest fan base on the planet. We only have 100,000 living alumni, but they do travel well for sporting events, especially when teams are good. Right? It's like every fan base, but they'll be out there in Arlington. They'll be wearing purple. They'll be loud, and it's a place that TCU is familiar with. They play non-conference games there every year. Barring, there was a time, I think it was 2022 or 2023, the Saturday game of a Baylor series in Fort Worth was threatened by weather. And so they just called up the Rangers folks and they said, yeah, we don't have a game here, so come on over. And they played one game of a weekend series against Baylor in Arlington because of the weather. And so there's a ton of familiarity with the stadium just from a team standpoint. And then the fans definitely show up and get rowdy as well.
Yeah, I love that spirit of cooperation that you've talked about a little bit between the Rangers and the world of college baseball. That's really cool. How well does TCU and its donor booster community support baseball compared to, let's say, football or men's basketball?
For a long time, it was the number 2 sport. Football obviously is king here in Texas, and that's never going to change. And I don't think it should change, frankly. But baseball has the second largest, maybe even the best legacy of one of the big 3 athletics programs on campus. I mean, 6 College World Series in the last, 12 years, 13 years. And, a history of winning wherever they've been from the time Jim Schlossnagle stepped on campus 25, 26 years ago now, till he passed the baton off to Kirk Saarloos in 2022. And so they have a ton of support from big boosters. They have a huge war chest, as it were. And I think we've seen the last couple of years, the NIL game for TCU baseball has been competitive with the best programs in the country as far as bringing in top talent. And so this is a program that TCU fans love, that they're invested in, and that they want to see continue to be successful in this rev share era. How that fully bears out, I don't know that anybody knows, but it's definitely something that TCU is gonna continue to love and invest in for years to come.
Right. So TCU is they were in the Mountain West right before joining the Big 12, and the composition of the Big 12, of course, has changed quite a bit here over the years. Oklahoma and Texas have left and gone to the SEC. As we lose Jamie here, maybe he's trying to adjust his.
I'm adjusting my lighting. I apologize
a little bit. No, all good. I'll just keep talking. So you add to the mix in baseball specifically Arizona, ASU, and Utah. Colorado doesn't play Division I baseball. Utah doesn't really have much of a history. It's difficult with the weather, although they are building a new stadium up there for their baseball team, so they're going to get out of the minor league park. And the weather is going up to BYU and going up to Utah is kind of a funky experience for everybody. So they have a little bit of an advantage there. And Coach was telling me that BYU kind of has an advantage over everyone because of their Thursday, Saturday schedule. Like everyone's number 1 starter gets moved up a day, whereas BYU is kind of on the same schedule as they always are. But anyway, roundabout way of asking, losing Texas and Oklahoma, but gaining Arizona and ASU. And of course, there've been some other additions to the conference, Houston, Cincinnati, etc. Where do you see Big 12 baseball compared to, maybe the conferences that get a little bit more attention from those who cover the sport?
It's a good question. And I think my answer, especially this season, is it's closer to the top than the bottom. And I think that when you look at the SEC, obviously it's the crown jewel in most sports right now. The ACC, as of last year, I think was probably the second best conference. You just look at the College World Series, right? It was 4 SEC teams and 4 ACC teams. So you kind of, extrapolate that out. But I think the Big 12 is closer to the ACC than most people want to acknowledge right now, especially when it comes to the top programs in the league. With the way West Virginia is playing, TCU and Arizona State kind of being these blue blood programs with a lot of tradition. Obviously, Oklahoma State's a little down this year, but they've got incredible tradition. Same could be said for Texas Tech, not having their best season, but traditionally a very strong program. And so that's 5, 6 programs right there that I think can, at their best and at their peak, can compete with anybody in the country. And you pair that with the fact that the ACC doesn't have a lot of depth this year. The Big Ten is almost an afterthought this year outside of Oregon and UCLA. And yeah, I think the Big 12 has a lot to brag about when it comes to talking about baseball at the conference level. And, at the end of the day, we can talk about it until we're blue in the face. You've got to see some results in the postseason. And so that's why I think it's so important for a team like West Virginia to finish strong, because not only are they in the hosting conversation, they're probably in the conversation for a national seed right now, maybe getting that 8th national seed. TCU, if they can finish these last 3 weekends, will probably end up being a host. Kansas, if they have a lot of success these last 3 weekends, could maybe slide into that conversation of being a host school as well. And so putting yourself in position to have postseason success is really critical for the Big 12. I think that's how the national conversation starts to shift and sway. But the reality is that with the way college baseball media is positioned, it's more beneficial to continue talking about the SEC because of the page views that you get and the subscriptions that you get and the alma mater of a lot of folks who cover college baseball. And I think that from a national perspective, even if it's unintentional, that starts to skew everybody into, their biases towards or against certain conferences. So I think the best remedy for that is just winning and just continuing to have success both in non-conference games at the beginning of the season and in postseason play, and then continuing to keep talent in the conference and allow that talent to bear out in the Big 12 rather than seeing guys quote unquote transfer up and start playing in different places.
Sure. I don't want to speak for every Arizona fan, but I do know a lot of them, and there's really nothing more satisfying to an Arizona fan than beating an SEC team.
I'm
They've
sure
knocked off
LSU is at the top of that list, right?
right. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. And every once in a while, you will see the field of 64 projections, and they have LSU on one side and Arizona on the other, or even Arizona going to Baton Rouge, which I don't know. My head would, as a reporter who covered Jay Johnson, my head would explode if that happened. But they beat Ole Miss in 2021 in the Super Regional to go to the College World Series, and like I said, a very satisfying experience for U of A fans. Look, the SEC is unquestionably the best conference in the country. They have invested the most in college baseball. They care about it the most. They get the most coverage on ESPN. So give them their props. I do think that it definitely feels like there's some bias that is baked into the RPI formula. Like SEC teams, it just feels like even if they lose, they will face each other, knock each other off and lose and still move up somehow, and West Virginia, I know West Virginia doesn't have a great out of conference strength of schedule, but they've beaten just about everybody they faced. And you'd look at just their win-loss record and you're like, why are they not higher than they are? Why are they not ahead of some of these SEC or ACC teams? But as you said, the only way to really change any of that is to just go out and win in the postseason. When that's how you prove it, right? Like RPI formula, we all have our issues with it. Selection committee, that's a subjective exercise. Actually facing these teams, putting these teams up against each other head to head, that's the proving ground. That's where you can show that the Big 12 is, as you suggested, closer to number 3 than maybe in number 4 in the conference pecking order, whatever that is.
For sure. And you look at some of you mentioned Arizona's win over Ole Miss, TCU going to the Fayetteville Regional in 2023 and hitting, Trey Richardson entrenched himself as a TCU legend in that Arkansas game because he had 2 grand slams and another home run in his first 3 at bats of the game, right? And Hagen Smith is making money now playing this game, so that wasn't exactly a nobody that they were killing up there in Fayetteville. Kansas State last year going to Fayetteville and doing almost the same thing to Arkansas and coming out of that regional. Um, so it's that kind of continual winning. That's what will cure all of these things. And at the same time, it's also from a team perspective of, hey, how do we block out all of these noises? How do we make sure that we stay focused on the task at hand? And how do we ensure that we're continuing to recruit talent that can compete at the highest level? Whether that's through rev share, through scholarship allocations, however we do it, the league has to kind of take an approach that is going to allow these coaches and these programs to continue to have success.
Right. Arizona's transition from the Pac-12 to the Big 12 has gone about as I would have expected. They have not had an easy series and very few easy games so far this year. The biggest difference that the players and coaches have cited is, you'd go out to Stanford or Cal or UCLA or USC and there'd just be nobody there. There's just not very well attended games. There wasn't really that hostile road environment, and you get that all over the Big 12 because these fan bases, especially throughout the state of Texas and Oklahoma State, I mean, they care, right? And that really makes a difference. I will say that Oregon going to the Big 10 has sort of changed the perception of the Big 10 a little bit. I mean, I think it's still clearly number 4 out of 4, but man, they're on a roll right now. I think they beat Oregon State 4 in a row. And they're vying to move into that, at least into the discussion, to be a host. One of the kind of the weird offshoots of realignment is that if Arizona ends up as a 2 seed, they could go to a Western site, which really there weren't a lot of options for them to do that in the past. But now they could end up in Corvallis or Eugene or UCLA or UC Irvine. I mean, a bunch of teams that used to be in their conference where that wasn't allowed before. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about, Jamie, is you have dabbled in the world of advanced stats. You have developed some formulas to determine wins above replacement for college players. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into that and what that looks like?
Yeah, so I was just, I think that baseball has always kind of been the frontier of advanced stats and data, and there is a lot that we can learn from what Major League Baseball and the professional ranks have done, and try to apply it to college baseball the best we can, with the understanding that the scope of talent and the scope of competition is much greater at the college level than it is in pro baseball. So one of the things that I wanted to do was try and find just another way of identifying who was the most talented and who was the most successful. And so one of the things that has always been able to do that is just kind of the wins above replacement stat. But just applying it the same way Major League Baseball does didn't make a ton of sense because of the significant talent drop off that you see from roster to roster and league to league. So what I did was I really wanted to start with just the Big 12 because I felt like that was a decent sample size. If you look at the roster sizes of the Big 12, that's about the same number of players overall as you have in the American League. When you think about number of teams and then the roster size, 25-man rosters in Major League Baseball, 35 to 40 in the Big 12, you're talking about roughly the same number of players as one of the leagues in pro baseball. And you're talking about teams that are relatively talent level. Yes, there are some players here and there that maybe aren't, but for the most part, you're talking about equally talented organizations. And so what I did was just start to play in our studio and say, what's kind of the best formula for determining who the most talented teams are and who's having the most success on the field, who's the most valuable player on their team. And so I played with a lot of 2024 data, and essentially confirmation bias played a little bit of a role when it's like, okay, well, Nolan Schubert was the best player in the Big 12 last year, and now he's starting to show up number one, number two in my WAR stat. I'm probably getting close to something that's right. Playing around with that, and then also playing around with what do defensive score, what does defensive adjustment look like in college baseball, where a first baseman or a DH in Major League Baseball gets really punished because they don't play defense or they're not in an important defensive position, whereas in college baseball it's more run dependent anyways. So how much are we going to actually scale defenses and punish a guy for not playing a important quote unquote defensive role? So scaling those down and making it more about what's happening at home plate, and then just running and seeing, does this actually look like it's getting it right, based on what we're watching on the field, right? Is Smith Bailey, one of the better freshmen in the league? Absolutely. So he should probably be around where some of these other really talented freshmen are, right? Is Guzman, one of the better hitting catchers in the league? Yeah, absolutely. So if you're talking about sorting out catchers, he should probably be somewhere near the top. If you're just looking at counting stats, WAR should probably reflect that to an extent. So it's a lot of just playing around, trying to get it right. On the pitching side, same thing with the defense, where how much do you account for a defense behind a pitcher at the college level? So are we going with fielding independent pitching, or are we going with runs per nine? I ended up doing a little bit of a blend there because I think that at the end of the day, a pitcher isn't just on the field by himself, and so you have to have some accountability for the defense. But also, what a pitcher is doing with the baseball once it's out of his hands is really not up to him. And so there's a lot that goes into that. But I'm still refining, still kind of playing with it. And then one of the things that I'm planning to do this off season is I've tracked all of the players that transferred out of every Big 12 baseball program and where they've ended up, and all of the players that transferred in to the Big 12 and all the returning talent. And so I want to start to try and identify which teams are the best at replacing talent, whether that's lost to graduation or the transfer portal. And just kind of that, I think that'll give us a really nice picture year over year of which coaches are the best at identifying talent and which programs are the best at recruiting talent. And that'll give us some kind of year over year data to start to work with when we're talking about who the best programs in the Big 12 are. And then, of course, at some point you can build all of that out and apply it to all of college baseball. But I love the Big 12. I love the programs in the Big 12. And so that's kind of where I'm starting with this.
Fascinating. I love it. I know that all of my nerdy baseball followers will really appreciate what you're doing in that space. D1 Baseball, which is the kind of the premier outlet that covers the sport. They do have some advanced stats on their website. They track things like FIP and XFIP, and like for batters, line drive rate and ground ball rate, and things of this nature, which are helpful. But Jamie's going a little bit deeper and really trying to determine the value of players, which I think is really cool. As we get you out of here, Jamie, tell the people who listen to the Wildcast podcast on a regular basis where they can find your work.
You can find me over at Horned Frog Blitz on 24/7 Sports. It's where all of my writing goes. You can find me at the Frogs Insider podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is Frog Preacher.
Awesome. We thank Jamie so much for joining us this week on the Wildcast podcast. Remember, you can find us on Apple or Spotify. Please give us a 5-star review. We would really, really appreciate it. Drop some comments in there as well if you would like. If you're heading out to High Corbett Field this weekend, the weather's looking pretty good. Friday and Saturday look nice. Sunday might be a little bit windy out there, and the Sunday games just tend to be kind of crazy and off the wall in a lot of ways. So I'm not surprised about that, but it should be really, really high level college baseball between TCU and Arizona. We thank everybody for listening to the Wildcast podcast. I'm your host, Michael Lev, for Jamie Plunkett. We really appreciate him joining us, and we will see you next time.